I just recall it was the most gorgeous day. The sky was bluer than I have ever seen it. For some reason, that stuck in my mind. It was such a beautiful day. The temperature was perfect. The sky seemed dark blue, which I very rarely kind of see. Just seemed like the picture perfect day.
I took the train to work that morning, and with transit, you're allowed to wear your hat with a long sleeve shirt or short sleeves up to October. So I remember that it was a cool, beautiful morning, and I was trying to decide, am I going to wear my hat with a long sleeve shirt or a short sleeve shirt? And I went with the short sleeve shirt.
For the kid I was riding with, he was fairly new. And I told him, this is normal on September 11th, because September 11th is my birthday. And I said, and then since my career, every time I worked on my birthday, weird things happen. But nothing serious.
Went to work that morning. The project we were working on was a bus terminal. I think it was like 7, 8 floors. At that time I was working for a company called AC Associates. We were doing decking. We were putting on the metal deck on top of the steel on the roof of the building. And at that time, we were just about to take coffee break. And someone said that there's a plane that crashed into the World Trade Center. And I was like, there's no way. So as we were, because we were so high from that area, there was no buildings blocking us. We had a clear view down and we seen the smoke coming out of the building.
We parked, we go in there to the deli, and I'll never forget it. I remember I grabbed my orange juice, and as I went up to the counter to order my 2 eggs over easy, ham and cheese, salt and pepper on a roll, the next thing I hear is 44 Willie. No, correction, 46 Willie. That's my unit number. 46 William, 49 X-ray, a condition boss, which is like a patrol supervisor, and a BLS unit. You to go over to Citywide. Citywide is a special frequency when they have something big going on. Instead of you tying up the regular traffic, they put you on a special frequency, and we were told to meet at the 59th Street Bridge because we're heading over to the World Trade Center.
So we're up on the roof now, and I'm looking with the big binoculars, and Yvonne is videoing with the video camera. And for some reason, it looked like they were throwing furniture out the windows. And I thought that was strange. I'm like, Yvonne, as I was looking, I said, Yvonne, why are they throwing furniture out the window? That's not furniture. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, those are people. They're jumping out of the windows. I'm like, no way. I said, why would anybody be jumping out the window? He gave me back the binoculars and I looked, and I could actually see people jumping out the window. And I was like, for the life of me, I couldn't understand why anybody would be jumping out of a window.
I get to work, our day starts, we work on 9 to 5. Our day starts at 9 o'clock. I'm usually at work an hour early since I'm coming from Suffolk. I was in the 14th floor locker room having my cup of tea, and I heard the first airplane fly by and strike the towers. Really not realizing what happened, I ran to the window. We saw a gaping hole, flames, smoke, debris, and we heard over the radio, because I had already had my portable radio signed out, that a plane just flew into the Trade Center, call 911 from our perimeter patrol people. With that, I ran to the roof of the building, which was 18 stories, to get a better view, and was awestruck by the devastation. The one thing that I seem to remember looked like the paper that was coming from the building, just a steady stream. It almost looked like confetti from where we were.
I had just gotten off the subway train, and there were the stairs that would go up to the street level, and the first plane had just hit when I was on the subway platform area, and I can remember the shock wave of the first plane, all the people that were actually on the stairs getting blown down the flight of stairs, and first, I mean, the sound was incredible. Even that, underground, it was extremely loud. So at first I thought, maybe it was like a car bomb or something like that. And then I was like, I have to get to the street and see what's going on. And you got up to the street level, and you could see the fire, and the glass still coming down, and papers coming down from from the explosion. Because basically, the Trade Center was just a huge office building. So,
And next thing I know, a big bang, and the building like shook really bad. It knocked myself and a lot of people that were standing up down on our backs. So we, got up, and people looking at us. What are we doing? What's going on? I said, who knows? Maybe it's the wind. Because up there, I don't know if you've ever been in the buildings, but the higher up you go, the buildings move with the wind. So it just popped in my head, maybe it was the wind. And, people look at me like, that's no wind. So I'm looking around, it's all glass around us, glass windows. And as I'm looking out the windows, I start seeing debris falling past us. And I'm still saying, I still can't figure out what's going on yet. It hasn't dawned on me yet until I saw a body go by us. But the guy was still alive. And he was like flapping his arms like a duck.
I was assigned to the Broadway-Nassau station, Fulton Street, which is actually a block away from the World Trade Center. And as a transit police officer, we cover those calls for the World Trade Center. That's an actual assignment to me when you cover the Broadway-Nassau station. And it said over the radio, it came over unknown condition at the World Trade Center. And we were 2 David 7, that was our call for the radio. I was with a partner, and so I answered my call, 2 David 7, to respond and report. And when we came out of the subway system, people were frantic and they were running and they were screaming, and there was a lot of debris in the area. As I ran towards the World Trade Center, people were pointing and screaming and shouting, that way, that way. And as I came upon the buildings, I saw Tower 1, I saw the rear end of a plane sticking out, halfway in, halfway out, but I could only see the rear of that plane in the building. And a lot of debris, people were frantic, people were panicking, not knowing what to do. And at that point in time, I called for assistance on the radio and confirmed that a plane had hit the World Trade Center, calling for other officers to respond, for assistance, for supervisors. And immediately we went to Building 2, which we were closer to, Tower 2, and people were still coming out of that building, and we tried to just get people to calm down and to evacuate, and we headed people uptown.
There was about 10 of us. There were also 10 other officers that responded from the Court Officer Academy at 123 William Street, which was probably 4 blocks west of the Trade Center location, and they all ran on foot to the location. So we ended up coming down Broadway, and we stopped in the vicinity of 7 World Trade Center, and we got off the bus, and with that, one of the officers that we worked with ran from the Canal Street subway station down Broadway as he saw the first plane hit, and reported it was Mitchell Wallace. And with that, there was a woman who was just carried out with a severe leg injury. And Mitch didn't bat an eye, got down on his hands and knees and started treating her. There was a photograph taken actually during that, and that was, as we later found out, probably last photograph that was ever taken of Mitch.
I was a fireman, a volunteer fireman, and so I went to my office and I checked in everybody that knew my background. But I said to them, I'm gonna go across the street to the firehouse on Liberty Street, which was the southern street of the World Trade Center complex. So I made it to the firehouse, and the guys at that firehouse were out at another call. They were at a gas leak at the time, but the captain of the truck company happened to be in quarters. So I introduced myself, I identified myself, showed him my badge, and said, I am a fireman. If you can use me, great. If not, I'll get out of your way. And he just looked at me and said, you're all I have. So you're in charge of triage.
And while we were watching, I remember seeing the second plane come around. Yeah, we seen it, and we were watching, and we seen it come around. We're like, where's that going? Why is there another plane so close? What's going on?
If I close my eyes, I can literally see the plane coming and then slowly turn as you knew that it was going to strike the side of the building. You know, and it, like I said, it just seemed like it was frame by frame. Like somebody was just doing a slow motion film, and we're watching this, and my partner and I were just standing on the top of this hill. We're just watching this, looking at it, and just saying, I can't believe it. Yet there it was. It was as real as I am looking at you right now.
So we kept making our way heading west towards Church Street. We saw wreckage from the airplane, or one of the airplanes, landing gear, engine parts. Didn't realize at the time, but you know, there was a lot of confetti, other debris. Some of that debris turned out to be people that were jumping. By Building 5, as we crossed the street, I remember seeing Tommy making the sign of the cross. I kind of realized, holy shit, we're in it, you know. So I also made the sign of the cross. We started making our way down the stairs, and I don't remember the order in which it happened. There was a woman clearly having a heart attack. We assisted her across street to the front of the Millennium Hotel. There was a triage station there. We dropped her off. We went back in. We grabbed some supplies from the ambulances there, started making our way back in, and there was a gentleman with a severe head laceration. He had trouble walking. We brought him back to the triage station. On our third trip into the building, I was met up with Captain Harry Thompson and Officer Mitch Wallace. So it was myself, Tommy, Mitch, and Captain Thompson. And there was another court officer, Sergeant Pat Mayorino, with the front door guiding people out. And I remember her telling us, heads up, there's reports of more incoming aircraft.
When the second plane hit, I was inside the building, Tower 2. I actually got blown out of the building. I was in near the elevator area evacuating people, and I was blown out of the building, you know, hit to the ground when the second plane hit. A big piece of metal had come down and like the size of a car hood and almost hit me. Blew me outside to where Borders bookstore was. So now I'm outside of the building, and I have cops that were in a little foyer of the bookstore yelling at me to get up and run because of all the debris coming down. All of this knowledge, I didn't realize what happened until later on, not even that day. But so what was happening was unbeknownst to me that another plane had hit the building, you know. However, FBI was on the scene, and they had said before the second plane hit, there was about 10 police officers working the area with me. Big brawly guy, FBI, around, you know, shield around his neck, came up to us and said, you know, you're not a coward, you know, if you want to leave, there's more planes coming, we're under attack, you know, you're going to die if you stay here. And this came from an FBI agent. And I remember looking up at him and saying, "You kidding me, right?" And he's like, "No." He said, "We're under attack. It's terrorism." So he knew more than I knew and what we knew. And the cops that I was working there with, we were like, you know, okay, we're just going to continue. It's like we're making a choice. We're not leaving. That's our job. You know, that's why it was more important to get all these people to safety. So we stayed and continued with our efforts. So we just continued to evacuate people. Like there was a woman down in the basement level that she had cerebral palsy and she couldn't walk and she was trying to get out of the building. And I picked her up and I carried her out of the building, and I knew that we had to get her away from the area because there was more planes coming because that's what the FBI had said. So now you got 2 planes hit the tower, so you're just in this smoke-filled, debris-filled area where there's jumpers. I saw my first jumper. I had no idea what it was. You know, when somebody just jumps and they're on the ground 20 feet from you, and it's just an awful sight. You know, it's like a tomato. You know, you can't. It's unrecognizable.
So we went inside each one of those floors, 29th all the way down, until about the 19th floor, made sure everybody was gone. People walking around still working at their desks. And, you know, you have to leave. I said, hey, I don't know exactly what happened outside, but, you know, it's nothing good. And no, they're telling us we can stay in our office and everything's good. I said, no, I'm telling you right now, you have to leave. And, you know, we finally got that done. When I reached the 19th floor, as I was going into that stairwell, I ran into a bunch of friends of mine from Engine Company 6. I told the lieutenant which floors I cleared. And he said he had to check it again anyway. They all got killed.
We pull up down there to the train center, and it's just total chaos. You got people there you're trying to rescue, you got people that are injured, and of course you got people sightseeing down that want to take pictures and everything. And I remember this one gentleman had a camcorder and he put it up to film, and I remember sticking my hand there and pushing his hand down, telling him, no, you really need to get out of here. And there were some ladies there, and I said, ladies, you need to get out of here. We need to clear the streets. And the lady's like, you don't tell me what to do. And she starts yelling at me. Then another lady starts yelling at her, and they're going back and forth because we're trying to, clear the street. And I would like to see that lady today because subsequently, when the building came down and we had to move her, she would have been dead.
Well, I was just ready to load up my truck, and it was kind of organized already, and they were like, you, and you, suit up, you're getting on a war bus. And I was like, what is a war bus, right? And by the time I got back to the precinct, well, it was early, it was still early, and there was buses in front of the precinct, and they said, suit up, and they put I don't know how many of us, maybe 25 of us, on a city bus, and it had body bags. And I think there might have been some MREs in there, some food, some type of food too. And they told us, drive around, just keep driving around. And I guess they were waiting for another attack. So that was because we couldn't understand what we were doing at first, and we were listening to Citywide, and we were listening to the chaos, and we all, we were like horses in the gate. Let us go down there, let us go down there. So it was very, very, very frustrating. I think they just didn't want us all to run down there and then have something else happen and then have no cops. This was probably, right around the time the second plane hit and, chaos was unfolding down there. Yeah, before the buildings fell. So the city had something going on already. They had a plan, they definitely had a plan in place. Someone was thinking enough to not have us all run down there and get killed. So it's actually brilliant. Pissed us off, but in the long run, brilliant.
I was there. A couple of the police officers that were killed were right there with me. The firemen that walked into the building, they went in, they never came out. I don't know what company they were, I don't know where they were from, but I held the door for them to get in and clear the way for them to walk to their deaths, basically.
The way I describe it, I don't remember what happened. The way I describe it that day is like a freight train. If you're standing over a subway grating when a train goes underneath you, magnify that 5,000 times, and that's what it sounded like.
Tower 2 collapsed first. I was actually inside the building near the escalators when the tower collapsed. When the building imploded down, it blew me out of the building. And I was able to hold on to the doorway with my left arm. And people blew by me and under me and through me, and only with one arm did I hold on. And if you ever saw a cartoon with somebody midair holding on for their life, I was actually holding on for my life. Not knowing what was happening, just knowing that there was explosions and that there was people coming past me and that there was utter terror. And I was able to bring my other hand over because this pressure of this air pressure was so intense. I was in shape, I worked out, I lifted weights 4 times a week, and that's the only thing that really saved my life, was me being strong.
We ended up where we were, at the mall level, beneath Tower 2. It was about 6 civilians that I seem to remember. And we came in contact. There was a female, severely burned. I estimated over 60% burns to her body. And we didn't talk much, the 3 of us. Just go this way. You know, we all had a mission on our mind, and we were working like a well-oiled machine. So I turned around, I said, I'll take her, because she was the critical patient. Turned out to be the best decision of my entire life. Put her in a chair stretcher. I introduced myself to her. I remembered she was 32 years old. She came from the 78th floor. I couldn't remember her name. We started exiting the area. I got maybe 100 feet away. Somebody yelled, "Get down." I heard this horrible noise. I thought maybe it was an airplane flying into the building. There was this tremendous rush of air, followed by this debris. I was thrown to the ground and shot across the floor about 100 feet with my victim, and that was the building collapsing. Fortunately, we were just outside the collapse zone. It was the last time I saw Tommy, Harry, or Mitch.
I guess about 10 minutes later, I watched these 8 guys, maybe even less than 10 minutes, you know, these 8 guys went across the street, and the civilians out front started screaming again. And I was like, "What's the matter?" They go, "It's coming down." I go, "What's coming down the plane?" And they were like, "No, the tower." So the tower that they were going into is where they got, they ended up getting killed.
And I remember getting into the van with the guys that I was assigned with, and we went over to Brooklyn North SATCOM, which was over at the 9-0 precinct. We went there, and all the other officers were starting to gather. And as we were watching the television, and we had the radio on. And as we were watching this, all of a sudden, the first tower begins to collapse. And this was very traumatic for us because one of the officers that worked with us, her brother was a fireman, and she knew that he had responded to this event. And all of a sudden, you could hear the officers who were trapped in the building calling for help. Yeah, on the radio. Yeah, they were still alive, and they were calling for the radio for help. As a matter of fact, the female officer who perished, I've forgotten her name, but you could hear her very clearly that she was calling for help. And that was one of the most helpless moments I've ever experienced in my entire life, because, unless I wore a Superman suit, there was no way I was going to take off 110 stories worth of debris off of a building. But at that point, the only thing I could do was I got up, I turned the radio off, because I knew that that was just having a very negative effect. All the officers that were in that room were crying, and I'm not ashamed to say that, because you would have to be more than heartless not to understand what was going on. They had already shown people jumping from the buildings, etc., so we already knew what was going on. We already knew, based on the radio chatter, that people were jumping from the buildings. So at that point, I told Sergeant Rodriguez, who was in charge of us, I said, "Well, Sarge, there's no point in us being here. I'm going to the site."
It almost looked like a tornado type of thing. It was swirling, and it was just coming at us, you know, and it was like, and I thought that if we got caught in it, that we were going to die, that, you know, we wouldn't be able to breathe, you know, I didn't know what to think. And we all started running. Everybody. I mean, I seen cops jumping out of their car running, like there was too many people, you couldn't, once you pulled in with your car, and then people came behind you couldn't get out. The only way to get out was on foot. And yeah, I just remember, you know, running for my life. I remember hitting into people, knocking people over. You know, there was a woman who, in a carriage with a baby, and you know, she was screaming, "Help me, help me!" And I remember for years it bothered me. Like I thought maybe she died because normally I'd help anybody, but I have a wife, 3 kids. I thought I was dying, you know, and I ran. I didn't help anybody, you know. And that's not like me, not to help anybody. And for a long time, I had a hard time dealing with that. I didn't actually stop to help people. So now we're running to get away from this cloud, and we look, you know, everybody dispersed different ways. You know, we're running, and then you can see the cloud passing us on the next avenue. Like, you know, that's how massive it was. And I just remember Yvonne was with me a good part of the way when we were running. He decides to stop and pray. He just stops. I'm looking over my shoulder, and I see him. He's on the floor. And I stop. I run over to grab him, to pull him, and he pushes my hand away. And he goes, "No." And I just kept running. And I thought he was dead. I just figured, you know. And he decided at that moment to pray. I decided to run.
And as I'm going up there, got knocked down by the blast, and I was body surfing up Vestry Street. And, you know, of course, then, you know, you couldn't see anything with the cloud. I thought I was dead. I stopped. I said, "This is being dead." I said, you didn't make it out. But then I said, "I can't be dead because I'm in pain in my back." So I said, "All right." And then I got up, coughing and choking, couldn't see anything. My eyes were all dust and everything. And I heard a woman screaming for help, you know, "Help me, help me." So I worked my way over to the voice and grabbed. I told her, "Look, I'm a policeman. I can't see you. I know you can't see me, but I am a cop." I said, "I'll help you. Just, you know, calm down a little bit." And then I seen a flashlight across the street waving back and forth. "Over here, over here. We can get in here." So we worked our way over to there. I think the address 27 I forget the address. It's next to a restaurant here right now. And the door had been blown in. He said, "Sergeant," it was plainclothes sergeant, and he said, "You know, come in here, we gotta, you know," I think so good. But it wasn't, so, you know, people, they were putting a broom closet, about 17, 20 people in like a broom closet, all coughing, throwing up, you know. So I worked my way back out of there, and I saw an office, because it had cleared up a little bit. And I saw an office building, glass doors for an office, and it was clean inside. But it was locked. Right. So I shot the door. At least we can get in there. It was big, it had water, and it was clean.
When the tower came down, now the front of the firehouse you couldn't get out of. They estimate that the wind speed where we were when the towers came down was about 140 miles an hour. So I was in the truck room, but I was about 6 feet away from a back wall, a cinder block wall, and I got thrown into that wall. And Brian Smith was in a little more of an open area. Okay, so he's about 25 feet away from the wall, and he hit the same wall. So we got thrown. If you were outside the firehouse, okay, you would have seen cars upside down and toppled on top of each other, and it just looked like a child had played with Matchbox cars, where they may have stacked them up and knocked the pile over and just to see what would happen. That's what it looked like, except they were like real full-size cars. The back part of the firehouse, part of it had gotten blown out, which we ended up using that hole to pass injured people through. what happened was when everybody started running towards the back of the firehouse, there was a narrow hallway, and everything went black. You couldn't see because of all the, you saw on TV that cloud. Okay, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Everything just went black.
With that, I had no idea what the hell happened. I got on the radio and started yelling, "Mayday, Mayday, I'm trapped, I'm in the basement, Mayday," which isn't court officer terminology, that's volunteer firefighter. I wear many hats. I'm a volunteer firefighter, I'm in the Air Force, I'm a part-time police officer. I reverted back to training that I had learned some 20-something years ago. Grabbed, the chair she was in flipped back, but I maintained contact with it. By the way, the individual, I later found out her name was Doris Torres. She had grabbed me by the shirt, had a death grip on me, wouldn't, please don't leave me. And I flat out lied to her. I couldn't see her, there was zero visibility. I had to put my face inside my shirt to breathe. Took out my little flashlight, and it did absolutely nothing. I don't think, all I saw was like a little orb of light that didn't project. And I told her, I said, "Sweetheart, don't worry, I promise we're getting out of here." It was perhaps the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced in my life. I flat out lied to her. I thought we were gonna die where we were. If I didn't have her, I probably would have curled up in a fetal position and just waited to die. She saved me. If our paths didn't cross, I would have been with Tommy, Harry, and Mitch. So, back to firefighter training, some 20 years ago. Had no idea where I was, completely lost. Found a wall, started feeling my way out. I didn't know where I was going. All I knew was something really bad happened that way and I was going the opposite direction.
There was a woman who was bleeding and crying, and she came out of the second tower and she collapsed. And I said, "Look at me, look at me, look at me. You're gonna make it, you're gonna make it." And no sooner than I said that, you heard the rumble again. And thank God, I knew what the building sounded like when I went down the first time. There was no hesitation. I told her, "We gotta go," because the building was coming down, right down on us. And I took off, and she's like, "Don't leave me, don't leave me." And I turned around and I looked, and I ran back, I grabbed her. And as we ran, directly across the street from the Trade Center is the Hilton Millennium. And as we dove into the Hilton Millennium, we got covered in there with debris. And I knew I wasn't gonna survive again, to survive the collapse of both towers.
I was alone, and then I got lost. I tried to go from 60 Hudson Street to the towers to go look for my boss, to go look for the commissioner that was with us. He was an elderly gentleman who was probably in his 70s. I felt bad that we left him, we ran. And while I was walking there, I got lost. And I was so disoriented. I didn't know east from west, north from south. Nothing looked familiar. I was asking people, "Can you help me? Can you tell me which way?" And then while this was happening, people were in shock. I may have been in shock myself.
We were trapped, and the only part of the building standing was a very small piece of cement where Richie and I were. Everything else was down. Now, we had to crawl out and through that, and as we crawled out, we saw people and we tried to help them, and they were dead, and we pulled people out, but we couldn't help them. And it was very quiet. It was eerie. It was utter silence. Just to go to utter silence, to this big, loud... I had no idea that the tower was down. I had no idea that the tower collapsed. I knew there was like a big cloud of smoke, and I came out to Vesey Street, where the church is, where the Millennium Hotel was. We ended up out there. And this is a picture of myself, Richie Vitale, after we crawled out of the building, and the woman on Richie's arm was standing with her hands up in the air, and her statement was, "Where's my pocketbook? I lost my pocketbook." She was in shock. She, you know, besides psychological injuries, she wasn't physically injured. Don't know where she was or where she came from. And we just grabbed her and said, you know, you need to come with us. We need to get out of here. And she did. And then Richie and I, we walked on to other areas. Richie and I were vomiting. And we were vomiting thick black chunks of, you know, we don't know what it was. I mean, now, you know, thinking on back, you know, now I think it was a good thing because we were trying to get that stuff out of our system. But we were both vomiting and we couldn't breathe and our eyes, our corneas were scratched. This woman, she left us. We helped other people and then we started hearing the beeps because we didn't know what they were. We thought they were car alarms. And we're like, what are all those beeps? And I'm like, you know, we didn't understand. The cars were crushed. There was small fires. There was debris everywhere. And the beeps were the firemen's packs.
On our way to Rector Street, we had the man with the broken pelvis, okay? He had a suitcase with him, a briefcase. And so we had some medical bags. We were carrying medical bags. We had this man, one on each of our shoulders, okay? And so he was in the middle, kind of like helping a football player off the field, and his bag. And he wouldn't let go of the bag. And we were trying to carry him, and we're getting hit in the head with this bag that's really heavy. So we said to him, we gotta leave the bag. He's like, no, I can't. And what's worth noting, he's from China. And we said, please, it's heavy and it hurts when we get hit in the head with it. Because I cannot leave the bag. And finally we said to him, what's in the bag that you can't leave? And it was $1 million in cash. So, okay, he had just gotten a loan from the Chinese government, and then the government made a loan to him in cash. So we're like, okay, we're not leaving the bag.
We ended up coming to a storefront. And there were a bunch of storefronts. It was all glass. It was a kitchen store, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my... I could peek in, the air quality, you know, I mean, I could see it was clear inside there. So I was dragging her with me. I unholstered my weapon because I was going to shoot through the glass to try and get in there to find refuge. We started feeling our way, and the door had been blown off the hinges. So we went in there, and I brought her over to by where the register was. Lectors, that was the name of the store. Lectures, housewares, yeah. And I grabbed her by the shoulders, and I said, Doris, I said, I'm coming back for you. I got to find a flashlight that works, you know. Ran up and down the aisles, went looking, you know, for anything. Came back, said, there's nothing in here. And I remember telling her, okay, sweetheart, let's get the fuck out of Dodge. And started making my way back out to where we were.
You were
Following.
People anywhere?
No, it was just us. With that, miraculously, we made our way back to the same stairwell. And then we were in that corridor. I mean, I was lost, and it was limited visibility, but it was better than where it was. And there was somebody screaming, anybody down here, anybody down here? We started screaming. And there was a Port Authority police officer, an FBI agent, and a civilian, and we all grabbed the corner of the chair, ran up the stairs to where we were, and it was a very, very different landscape, where, moments before, there was chaos, people running, screaming, deafening sound of sirens close by, coming in the distance, people jumping. You know, I came out and everything was gray. There wasn't a sound to be heard. There was just this deafening silence. The triage area that we just left these last two people at, the ambulances were on fire, they were overturned. I was lost. It was like the end scene in Saving Private Ryan, when Tom Hanks is by himself at the bridge and he has no hearing, and so we ran up Fulton Street to We ran past the church. The Millennium Hotel was on our right. I think it was a Citibank. And that was a new triage station that had been set up within minutes of the collapse and everything else. Dropped Doris off there.
There was a restaurant down in that area, but in the Battery Park. And I said, I'm gonna just see if I can wash my face real quick. And they were operating like nothing happened. They were serving, at this point they were serving lunch, you know, the early lunch crowd. And again, I'm still covered in ash. My eyes are absolutely burning. And I try and open the door, and people are like, no, that's an emergency door, you can't open that door. Okay, so I go to another door, and finally I find a door that opens up into the restaurant. And I try not to bother anybody, and I go over, and I finally find a restroom where I could wash my face and get some water in my eyes and try and get a lot of the grit out. And a waitress comes in and starts yelling at me. She goes, do you realize you're in the ladies' room? And I couldn't tell. Like I said, my eyes were burning, and I just knew it was a bathroom. And I don't think they really got it. I don't think they really knew.
They said to us, well, where are the patients? And we said, they're dead. And they're like, well, what do you mean? We said, they're dead. There is no patients. They're all gone. And so they were like, well, you guys must be in shock. So what, you guys sit down. Then another ambulance would come up. They would take all their equipment off, and they would put it there. And they said to these guys, so where are the patients? And they were like, there is no patients. They're dead. And it wasn't until maybe the fourth ambulance came, and the SAC crew said the exact same thing. The people that were there were like, that's when it really dawned on them, oh my God, the people are dead. I said, yeah, there are no patients. They're dead. There's body parts. And, you know, the few critical ones, they've already been taken, and everybody else is, they're gone, they're dead.
We didn't know where we were walking, but I personally didn't look back to see the tower was down. I didn't know the tower was down. I didn't know what happened. And as we were walking through this big cloud of smoke, somebody just kept, you couldn't see, you couldn't breathe. We were choking, and I thought a nuclear bomb hit, or I felt like napalm was dropped, like the Vietnam War. I really thought that we were just going to drop and die at any moment. And I kept hearing, Holy Mary, Mother of God, and somebody just kept praying. It was a man's voice. And they just kept saying it, and it'd get louder and louder, and we didn't, you know, and, you know, later on I asked Richie, I'm like, did you ever see anybody? And he said, no. And I'm like, did you hear that man? And he said, yes. And it was like a voice we were walking to, and it was really eerie because my dad had passed away. And I think it was my dad. So that was very difficult.
I didn't get home until 11 o'clock that night. My uniform was torn, and I had blood and burnt flesh on it, and took the train to Babylon. My mother picked me up, because my car was at the Islip station. Cried. First thing we did was we went to St. Mary's Church in East Islip, said a prayer and lit a candle.
I did my best, it wasn't much. I couldn't feel, so I learned to touch. I've told the truth, I didn't come all this way to fool you. Yeah, and even though it all went wrong, I'll stand right here before the Lord of Song with nothing on my tongue but hallelujah.
On September 11th, 2,751 people died, perished, because of an act of senseless violence, because evil people wanted to do evil things to the people of New York. But they did that because of ignorance. It's the way they were brought up. They don't know any better. But in the true classic form where evil meets good, people from all over this country, not just New York, 435 congressional districts in the United States, 431 of them came to Ground Zero. The good came to fight that evil.
The first thing we did as iron workers and the laborers and painters who were with us, once we came out of the tunnel, some of us got down on the sidewalk and said a prayer because some of us had never been in a disaster that was apparently an act of war, or warlike in nature. The devastation, the smell, the helicopters. I can still hear the sirens going off. The jets, the fighter jets, flying their sorties, that echoing through the towers of the booming of their turbine engines. And then on top of all of this, you hear sirens constantly, all kinds of emergency whistles.
Especially once the first building collapsed, I knew that a lot of firefighters were going to be buried. There was no doubt in my mind that we had lost a lot of people that day. And I just wanted, it was important that I be on the pile as quickly as possible.
I remember doing almost 100 miles an hour going in because it was just the troopers blocked all the roads off. And you had your parking plaque and you had your shield out and they were just waving you through that tunnel vision. I knew I had to get to work, so.
We were kind of like somber in a way. We really didn't speak. We couldn't believe what was going on. We had 1010 winds on the radio going, and we had, some of us were on the phone calling other detectives in our unit to come in. And, it was just a weird thing. I've never seen anything like it before. It was almost like a horror flick, a scene, the Long Island Expressway, when do you see it with no traffic at all? And, firemen were just, you could see their franticness trying to get into the city so bad that they were actually crashing their vehicles into signs. There were many accidents, and we couldn't stop. We knew that they were okay, but we just kept on going. As soon as we picked up a police car, we went right into the Williamsburg Bridge, and we pulled up to the precinct, and I couldn't believe my eyes. Grown men on their knees crying.
And I'll never forget riding over that bridge, and we were the only bus on the road, and just seeing the smoke, and you could hear a pin drop. You got like 40, 50 cops on a bus, and you could hear everybody breathing. It was just the smoke billowing and stuff, and then we got the bus as far as we could get down there, and you could start to see the dust, and the layer of dust was just like snow.
When I got out of the car, I saw this lady. She was covered in blood, and she looked gray, like a gray human being. And she was walking around mindless, She was in shock. And there was nothing I could do for her. I asked her, can I take you upstairs, we'll clean you up, and I'll bring you home? She says, no, I'm just gonna walk over the bridge and go home. I just wanna go over the bridge and walk home.
Link responded as most of the city guys did. They just got up and go. And my friend asked the question, where was Link? Was he home? Was he working? So we called his house, and his wife at the time told us he was working. Didn't know where he was, and that was our motivation to go in there. He was part of our community. He worked in New York City at Rescue 2. He volunteered in Brookhaven as a firefighter, and he was one of our brothers, and he was missing. It was our job to go get him.
At the time, I had two brothers One was FDNY at the time, and the other one is a New York electrician who was actually down there when it happened, witnessed it, and was down there helping since day one. And then upon hearing how one brother could not speak about it, what he saw and was doing down there, and the other brother coming back and hearing such horror stories, I just felt like I had to do something. And I just packed up my table with a few supplies, went down to the site.
I was in 14th Street, and when the first plane hit, we thought it was an accident. And then we saw the other plane hit. I couldn't work anymore. I just had to go home for that day. And I was looking at the whole situation on TV, and I couldn't help it. I had to go. I just had to be there. I leave my house 12 o'clock in the morning. It was 12 o'clock midnight. And I went down and I stood at Chelsea Piers from 12 midnight. And then a cop came out and he says they need oxygen, they need acetylene. At the time I was working for New Roads. So I called the owner of New Roads and I says, look, this is a situation here, we need oxygen, we need acetylene. And he says, not a problem, take it. And I told him, I says, I'm going in.
Picture yourself on a set where there's no color. As we got closer and closer to the actual site, everything went from green street signs, red billboards, and everything just got gray. And it was gray, we realized later on, from the dust that settled. Watching it on TV afterwards, you see the cloud of dust as the buildings come down. The cloud just was immense. Nothing was colored anymore. Everything was just gray. And the rain didn't wash away the gray. It just stayed very drab and gray. And as we approached the scene, there was a lot of lights. The whole place was lit up. And where we expected to see two tall buildings, we just saw a skeleton.
As we were walking in, we could see firemen and other cops walking out, and I'll never forget the look on their faces. It was like nothing, like hollow souls. It was like frightening, and we're walking in all clean and shiny, and they're coming out just shot to hell. You know what I mean?
Coming over the Brooklyn Bridge, you couldn't see Lower Manhattan. You were riding from the light into darkness. You know, there was so much dust still in the air at that time. It was almost unbreathable. Before we left the firehouse, I made the guys grab every tool that we had. You know, crowbars, whatever. It didn't matter what kind of a tool it was. We would take it with us in case we needed it. You know. But quite frankly, most of the digging was done by hand. Everybody was on their hands and knees digging. It's just, that's the way it was, quite frankly, most efficient.
I can remember one guy was staring into the ceiling, a firefighter, and I turned, staring into the sky, and I turned to the guy and said, what's the matter with him? He says he just lost his best friend, he just lost. Man, it was so horrific. It was so much going on. And it's like, the first thing you feel the knots in your stomach, the second thing you feel anger. And then after that, there was such a high sense of uncertainty. You don't know if things is gonna be back the way it was. It was so much going on.
Wow, that was the reaction, wow. How could this happen? The most powerful nation in the world, how could this happen? Why would anyone want to do this? Why would anyone want to bring a giant to its knees and prove a point by killing innocent people? That got us really angry, but it didn't stop us from saying, hey, remember the purpose, we need to go find Lincoln. So we got there, There was no controls, no place to report to, nobody to check in with like they had about 2 or 3 weeks later, a month later. None of that was set up. You just got in and you started digging.
When I was there on the pile that first day with my lieutenant, we couldn't do anything. There was just too much. You didn't know what to do or where to go. It was chaos, and it wasn't even organized chaos. It was lieutenants, captains walking around in a daze, firemen crying, police officers crying. You know, it was horrible. It was kind of like a movie I kind of forgot. You know, it's when I bring it up, I think my whole nightmare was, and I still have, the nightmare of the locator beacons going off. I mean, that says a lot. I mean, that's a human body below you, you know, and you're walking on top of it. There's nothing you could do. You can't move these, 10-ton beams. There's only so much you could do.
I remember the first night working till I think they pulled us off at 3:30 in the morning. And I was in a little hole with another fireman digging the Port Authority guy out, McLaughlin, that was buried for so long. And waiting for another team to rotate in as we came out. And they had to be back at work at 7 in the morning.
There was a rescue operation going on. They said they had a guy trapped. They were trying to extricate him, and they were all taking turns. And it was going on for quite some time, from what I understand. So I was able to, because I knew some of the police officers, I was able to me personally get involved in that rescue. And there came a time when I actually did go into the debris pile to do the rescue. There were still active fires going on down there around us. Firefighters were basically misting the whole area with water. So you're actually walking through the water because they're trying to keep the dust down, the smoke, and the heat. Like I said, there were many explosions happening all around you while this is going on. Prior to going in, I learned that John was trapped, and at this point he was still trapped by his legs. And the plan was, at that time, was in order to save his life, if we couldn't extricate him, they were going to had doctors standing by, and they were going to amputate his legs if they had to.
You had an entrance, and you had to lay on your belly and snake around. You couldn't just see him. You had to crawl in through this thing, which was dark, and you could see the flames burning underneath, and it was right next to an elevator shaft. I remember because I was leaning on it, and the guy said, "That's an elevator shaft," and I looked at it, and you could see down. You thought you were on the ground because it was a pile, but we were like 6-7 stories up. He was buried from waist. And the hole was so small, we had to take our Scott packs off to be able to get in that way. That's how tight it was. They put a line around our waist. And the first thing I was thinking, I always think like a rescue line or something. And the whole thing was, I'm like, well, I'm going in this way. I'm snaking around on my belly around. I says, there's no way you can pull me out. And the guy just looked at me. It was a fireman actually, looked at me. And I'm like, oh. That's so if it collapsed on us, they would just know where to find us later on. We would be on the end of the rope. So it wasn't to pull us out. It was just to find us if we died. I was scared, but yeah, it's what it is.
John was asking us, whatever you do, don't leave me here. And we. No, I'm all right. We told him that we weren't leaving until he came out. So we took turns, again, over him, removing debris. We finally were able to get that big piece of concrete out. It took some time. We put some webbing that we used for rescue under his shoulders and around his chest. And the three of us said, let's give him a pull. So simultaneously we pulled. he let out a grunt. He was in a little pain. So we took a rest, let him rest, and we did it again. At this time, we felt him give a little bit. So we all looked at each other and said, we think we got him. Pulled again, he broke free. And we worked him up, and by this time now, when I went in that hole, it was 3:30 in the morning. It was now 6:30 in the morning. When I came out of the hole, John was obviously being passed down. Sun was coming up. One of the best sunrises. You can see from the debris pile hole where we were, all the way down to the street, line of rescue workers. And John just got passed down through everybody. And off he went to the hospital. We worked our way out, retrieved some of our equipment. Me and the two firefighters at the street level all hugged each other. And it was a job well done, I guess.
They gave us bags and tags and all kinds of stuff, and the first thing we are looking at is you were looking at stuff down there and you couldn't kind of make out what it was, and the first thing I found was an entire body burned into rebar. But you had to kind of look a couple of times and then we needed a wheelbarrow. We couldn't just bag this, tag this, and carry it out. We needed a wheelbarrow to come in, and I remember seeing, I thought I saw a driver's license. It turned out just to be a business card, and I said, oh, a woman's pocketbook. I picked it up. It was the top of someone's skull, and it was burnt. The hair was burnt. But the majority of it was so unexplainable, the rubble down there. There was not a desk, there was not a chair, there was not a computer, there was not a briefcase. There was nothing but dust, concrete, rebar, and papers flying around. That is it. I mean, everything else had to be pulverized. There was not a telephone. There was not an electrical wire. I mean, there was nothing but concrete. It was just unbelievable. It was an unbelievable mess.
Actually, what we did was form lines. We had those 10-gallon buckets from Home Depot, the orange buckets, and the guy at the front of the line would fill it up with the debris, and the bucket would be passed like an old fire bucket brigade, and it got to the end, they just kept feeding buckets. One line putting empty buckets back up the hill, and one line going down the hill full.
When you saw those lines, there was millions of those lines. They may show one line of cops. This was 16 acres. There was millions of those lines. But it was interesting because when we pick up a piece of something, they would either yell hot, sharp, or heavy. And we would pass it to the next person. But it would be an NYPD guy passing it to a Fort Lauderdale cop, passing it to a federal agent from Washington, passing it to a Virginia cop, passing it to a fireman from, Daytona Beach. I mean, they came.
Oh God, I don't know how long I had been on the pile. And I was really tired. This wasn't in the first couple of days. It was maybe in about 4 or 5 days. And I was really, really tired. And I was passing a bucket, and I was saying to myself as I passed the bucket, when I give it to him, I'm gonna get off the pile and go and rest. And as I turned, I'm handing the bucket to Boomer Esiason, who was a football player, had retired, and is now a sportscaster. But he was on the pile. So now I couldn't go and rest. No way I was going to let Boomer see me leaving the pile. So I went back to work. Well, you were dealing with dust, instability of the pile itself, shifting and whatnot. You were dealing with smoke from the fires. when you were finding remains, you were dealing with bloodborne pathogens, and so it was just one step to the next. It just there was some danger in everything you did.
They would blast these horns because they were worried about supposedly the Millennium Hotel at that time coming down. I was about 75 feet away from hitting the street at the first time we ever heard the horn, and that was chaos because guys were getting trampled, guys were getting hurt. The gentleman I went down with, who was the foreman, his son got severely cut across his leg, running off the pile, tripped, fell, and a piece of steel just ripped his whole leg wide open. Watching guys get impaled on steel rods when they fell. But that was an issue, and I did it once, and then we went back the second time, and I was with a couple of firemen, and they said, "We don't move. We'll wait until I get the call from somebody else telling us really that that building's coming down," because they were watching everybody run so crazy.
All of a sudden, we hear a voice from above. It wasn't God, saying, I forget what the voice said. Evacuate. Evacuate, take cover. What was happening was, and I turned around and I looked at him. I said, evacuate where? Where are we gonna go? How are we gonna get out of this? We're 20, 30, 40, 50 feet deep in a hole. It took us half an hour to get here. We're not gonna get out in 5 minutes. Whatever is gonna happen is gonna happen.
The only thing I could say, and when I tell you I'm very loyal to the police department, I hope you believe that. I'm just disappointed what they've done to certain commands, and what I mean by that, it was the commands that originally, now I can't say first responders, the original responders that took the first hits and brunt of this. What I do know is that word came down, not officially, but that they're all dead anyway, so just keep them down here working and just write them off, and that's the end of them. And we're never relieved. We're never allowed to transfer out of the area. And they worked us to death. They got as much as they can out of us, and then they said, "You're on your own." And I'm very disappointed in that. But I guess that's the way things are.
We didn't sleep. It's 30-something hours we worked that first night. And then they kept a 24-hour on, 24-hour off for approximately a week, maybe two. Then they went to a 3-group system where if you were in A group, you worked in a firehouse. And if you were in the B group, you worked on a pile. And if you were in the C group, you were off. And they just kept rotating that.
The thing that stuck in my mind that I thought was, kind of funny was that, we're sitting and eating in this stuff and breathing it all day. But as we would leave, there was no decontamination when we left the site. You know what I mean? But when we left, you'd have a checkpoint and they would wash our cars off that was sitting with all the stuff on it for the day, so we wouldn't contaminate the rest of the city. But we're caked in this shit, and we're driving home and back to our headquarters, or back to our command, with this stuff in our hair, our nostrils, everything else. But they wanted to wash our car off to make sure we don't contaminate anybody on the way out. We were laughing, look, they're washing our car off so we don't hurt anybody. Look at us. I mean, you were so burnt out. Honestly, you just didn't give a shit no more. You just like, whatever. So,
There was a lot of dust. When I say a lot, lots of dust. But they had said that the dust was okay. So you weren't, thinking about wearing a mask because you had everyone there and officials was there without masks. So you know that, you had nothing to worry about,
They decided to give us these nice not gas masks, but face masks. It had these 2 cylinders on the side because it was still burning and dusty down there. And then they told us we couldn't wear them. You have to have them, but you can't wear them. I said, well, what's the sense of that? He said, well, if you get down here and we start letting the civilians back in, they're going to get worried and they won't come back down. But if they see you not wearing these masks, they'll think it's okay. I said, what about what about us with all this stuff down here? He says, doesn't matter. You have to have the mask because the department issued them, but you're not allowed to wear them. I said, all right, well, what are you going to do? So he threw them in the car and left them there. After a while, we just left them in the locker.
We were just put in a machine mode. You do what you have to do. You're doing it for your country, you're doing it for your city. And I came to work deathly ill. I was vomiting. I was coughing up blood. I hate to say this, but my fecal matter was green for weeks. I must have caught something, or, my wife was begging me not to go to work. Calling sick. How can I call in sick? I just had brothers that I just lost. I could deal with this, And you put that on your shoulders, You put that on the families that they lost, their fathers, brothers, sisters, and, no complaint in the world's gonna match what they went through, so you just do what you have to do.
My hardest part is that, for me, I felt unsatisfied that we didn't find anybody alive, that everybody we dealt with was passed away. So that was hard for me. I wanted to find somebody, and there was the hopes of, they kept saying, oh, there's people alive under this, people alive under that. And, you'd hear guys cheer, and they thought they found somebody, and they thought they heard somebody at the time we were there. And it didn't happen. It didn't happen, unfortunately. Everything we found was people passed away.
Normally, if there's a fire, you go in, you put the wet stuff on the hot stuff, you go home. If it's a motor vehicle accident, you bring out the tools, the jaws, the cutters, the spreaders, you cut the car up, pick up the collapsed building, whatever it needs to be to save the victim. This is a little different. This is different in that we're looking for pieces that would lead us, pieces of evidence that would lead us to someone. Like I said, if hopefully we found a hand, the rest of the body would not be far away. And hopefully the body was alive. Never found anyone alive. Not one.
In the 3 months that I was there, we found very, very few victims. Found pieces, but not bodies. I remember shoes. Kept finding shoes with feet in them. And you'd say, oh, well, there's a body here. And you would dig and dig and dig, and there would be nothing else. Just a shoe with a foot in it. I couldn't understand why there wasn't the rest of the body. I mean, if the foot is here, there has to be something else, and there wasn't. You would dig and dig, and there wouldn't be anything.
And then the one thing I carry away from this that is so sad, and that I never want to see again, is I work with a ton of big guys, whether they're firemen or cops. I mean, and and I'm a little scrapper. When I need help, I need 6 guys, and they know it. But I'll tell you, I never want to see a bunch of huge guys hiding in corners and down on their knees, bawling like kids. And you weren't allowed to cry down there, so we would hide. We built barricades and stuff. We built little secret rooms where we could all go, but I never want to see big giant groups of men like that crying. It was crazy. It was so overwhelmingly sad that we just had to keep standing each other up. And now you help me, and then I'll help you, and then we'll help that guy. And it was crazy. It was just insane.
With these rescue workers coming across our tables, not only were they experiencing the emotional aspects, the sadness, the hurt, the relief, the aches, the pains, the respiratory, these people were also, they're just like you and I. Normal people doing their job, but on top of being on the pit, seeing, feeling, finding what they were seeing on the pit, And then they also had to attend memorials, wakes, and funerals to support their fellow brothers. And on top of that, they had family members. I don't know how they did it.
About 2 weeks into it, though, a wonderful little funny thing happened. The dogs, they were like the ones getting hurt down there and stuff like that. They were the little unsung heroes, right? The dogs were getting depressed because they weren't finding survivors. So I was down there with a guy from the 113, and they asked for volunteers to hide in the rubble. They pulled everybody off the rubble, and they hid a bunch of us up there, and they told us to lay down like we're hurt, and they sent all the dogs in. And the dogs started barking, and life came, and everybody was clapping, and life came back to the place, and we pretended that they found us, and it was incredible, though. That was something that was unbelievably moving, you know, it really was.
As a matter of fact, I remember we commandeered or were allowed to use the church, I believe it's St. Paul's Church, which became my home away from home. So to speak, because every day that I was assigned over there, that's where I was in that area, you know, and that's where we took rest, and that's where we ate if we so chose to eat something. And in that church, there's a pew, there's a box actually, and when then became first president of the United States, George Washington had been sworn in on Federal Hall. If you recall, he went from there to the church directly after. And there's a pew there, and in it there's a plaque. And I remember reading that plaque, and I don't recall the exact words, but it had to do with what he was thinking at the time. And I couldn't help but thinking to myself, I said, you know, I kind of think I know what he was thinking, because the country was in devastation. Oh yeah, we won the war, you know, but the battles all through the United States had left nothing but devastation. Here he is now, the president of a country that's devastated. Well, I sat down in that same pew, and I just looked at it, and I said, I understand what he was thinking. That no matter what, we were going to overcome this. And that was the morale, and that was the thought of the officers and the people that were there, that we were going to overcome this.
That very first day I was telling you that we went down there for 20-something hours. When we came back, the bus stopped in front of the precinct across the street, and the minute 2 or 3 guys get out of the bus and they were covered in dust, the cars on a big boulevard stopped going both ways. People got out of their cars and started applauding. It was amazing. It was amazing. I was like, what happened? Where are we? You know, this is a precinct where they kick on you, and they don't really like cops. You know, cops were not on the highest, you know, of everybody's I love list back in those days, you know. So it was interesting, the change that happened to, you know, being a cop was suddenly, you know, all right. You know, it was kind of respected now, where it wasn't, you know, before. The response of the guys I worked with, the guys from the city of New York, firemen and cops, but the response from the country. Not just the guys, the firemen and stuff that came, but you know what? We had stuff in the girls' locker room in our precinct. Like we had wipes and hand soap, and it would say on it, "We love you," the ladies from Ohio Auxiliary, you know, and we kept all that. I mean, like, you know, we wanted to write thank yous, and the kids' things all over the precinct, from every kid place, you know, every handprint from every kid in Florida was on our walls. It was just these "I love you" notes covered the walls. It was incredible. So that is so motivating, you know. And then the ladies just in our precinct who cooked for us every day. When they came in with the first spread of food after about a week, we were like, vegetables. It was like, you know, we just kissed them, you know, we loved them, you know, and that's not even our, like, this is a totally black neighborhood. And we were like, fried chicken and grits, and, you know, just give it to us, you know, the thoughtfulness, you know.
I have a collection of little teddy bears. It's like every time you really get looking really whipped, some young girl will walk up and give you a teddy bear. Yeah, here's a teddy bear, you know. And it would perk you up and you go back to work. I remember Sigourney Weaver feeding people. I don't know the actor's name. He played Fred Savage's father in The Growing Years or something. He was down there constantly. Every time I was there, I saw him there. He was driving around an all-terrain vehicle, giving guys coffee.
A hero is someone who in someone else's eye has done something great or fantastic. If you have kids, you are your kids' heroes. They look up to you. They look to example from you. I didn't do anything that any red-blooded American who wanted to help out wouldn't do. I'm not a hero.
The people that came in afterwards certainly were no heroes. We didn't rescue anybody, we didn't save anybody, you know. The people that were the heroes were the guys that were there first. Those 343 people from the fire department that died, those police officers, the Port Authority police officers that died, they were the heroes. They went into that building knowing full well that those balloons could come down, and they kept going up. So, you know, I consider the ones we lost heroes. Those of us that came after were just cleanup men.
When I heard that Father Michael Judge got killed, that really shook my belief in God, you know. And I couldn't understand how a priest doing God's work could be the first person to die on that day. When they had the memorial service for Harry Thompson, Mayor Giuliani was at the church, and he got up and he spoke. And he really put things into perspective and got me back on track and got me back to believe in God. And he said that God took Father Michael Judge because there were just so many people that he needed to minister to. He couldn't possibly have ministered to them. So by him taking him, he could minister to everybody now and do God's work. I got a lot of comfort from that and renewed my belief in God.
I think it was February or March, I was put back down there again. And I think I was doing an overtime tour. It was morning hour, and I just got there, and I was sitting in my truck, looking around again. We're doing perimeter security, and I had a Catholic priest come to my truck and a young lady from a Christian church out here in Long Island. And they asked me if they could go. I happened to be guarding an area that they didn't allow civilians into. And they came to me and they asked me, "Detective, would you mind if we went downstairs to this parking garage? We need to see something down there." And, you know, my curiosity hits like, well, what do you need to see down there, you know? Well, we really can't explain it to you. You need to come see it. I walked down there with him and this lady, and as I turned the corner, I saw this beautiful ray of sunshine coming. Coming through this wall, behind this wall. As I'm walking through, there's this wall covering the parking garage, and behind this wall is where sunshine coming through. And I walked towards it, and I made a left, and look at this hole in the wall. And it was like being hit. I couldn't understand it. I fell to my knees and I started crying like I'm doing now. But what I didn't know there was that there was a cavern inside the building. And the whole time I was there, I didn't even know this. And when they had finally uncovered it in February sometime, this cavern went down probably 150 feet. And as I looked through the wall, I saw 3 crosses had impaled themselves in the ground in perfect unison. And they had clothes draped on them and paper draped on them like arms. And I said to myself, I said, this has got to be God's work, because, you know, losing faith in him. I said, you know, they didn't die in vain. Then I thought of the Holy Trinity, you know, the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. So I think, you know, that changed my life. I mean, I was very cynical. I became very cynical. But I think my faith in God really came back to me that day. And I always reflect to that.
You've seen it on TV, you don't get you feel upset, but when you go and see the natural sight, the knots in your stomach, and the anger, and when you see body bags that's coming out, it's very, very upsetting, very. I wouldn't wish that on my enemy, but you know what? If God forbid something like that should happen again, there's no force on earth that can stop me from being there. I would do it all over again. I have no regrets, none, none. The strength of this country is not its military might, it's its people and its compassion. And I would have given my life for this country in a second. And I truly mean that.
To tell you the truth, there was nothing good about it. There was nothing inspiring other than the camaraderie that we had as a group. The cops, the firemen, the iron workers, EMTs, everybody who got together and just said, you know, it all sucks, but it all sucks for all of us. And we all help each other out. And no one will understand what our group went through, you know. And I hope no one does. You know, I just hope that people don't forget, you know, what everybody did there and how shitty it was. And one thing that it did do was I'm proud as hell, you know, to be an American. You bet your ass on that.
I remember there was this little girl. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old. She had that beautiful, like, platinum blonde hair and the bluest eyes. And I could see her from a distance. And I told the guys that I was with, I said, how much trouble do you think I would get in if I walked that little girl right to the edge of the pit? And they said, Ralph, you would get into a world of trouble. I said, that's right. So I walked into the crowd. I looked at the father, and I said, I'm going to take your daughter into the pit. Because you could see that she wanted to see. She was just holding on to the fence. And I said, you can come along with me. And I said, bring the camera, don't worry about it. Walked her all the way to the edge of the pit. And I stood there and I told her, I told her, sweetheart, do you know why I brought you here? And she said, no, with the innocence of a child. I said, because when you get to be my age, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to tell you that this never happened, because right where you see this hole, there's going to be a beautiful park. And they're going to build big buildings here, and no one's ever going to know. But you're going to know, because you saw it with your own eyes. And with that, I walked her all the way back. And everybody thought I was crazy, but I knew exactly what I was doing. Because 30 years from now, you know, the same way that they say the Holocaust didn't happen, and the same way that they make up all these other stories, there's going to be those people who have their own agenda, and they're going to say, it really wasn't that bad. This really didn't happen. Look at this area. How could it be possible?
Operations to all sector chiefs. Shut the operation down and form up on the bridge.